Hi guys, tonight we're diving into the blistering, soot-stained life of a man who didn't just live in the medieval world, he forged it. Literally, the blacksmith. Now, you've seen them in movies. Glowing iron, slow motion, hammer swings, sparks flying in dramatic showers, like some medieval rock concert. But let me kill the fantasy real quick. Being an actual blacksmith was less majestic training montage and more sweaty, painful, lifelong arm workout that nobody asked for. It was exhausting, filthy, and blister-inducing. Basically, it sucked. Before we fire up the forge, don't do me a favor. If you genuinely like what I do here, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me where you were tuning in from and what time it is for you, because it's always wild seeing people watching from every corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that cozy background hum, and let's step into tonight's story together. You were born into the proud but permanently soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths. No crowns, no castles, no fancy family crest, just a forge that never stops. Anvil-shaped blisters and the smell of roasted iron baked into your baby blanket. The moment you can walk without falling face first into the fire pit, congratulations, you're drafted. By age 6, you're officially your father's apprentice, which, translated into medieval honesty, means tiny, unpaid assistant with no rights and permanent soot streaks on your face. Your toys, tongs, your playground. A dirt floor next to a furnace, hot enough to deep fry your eyebrows, while other kids are chasing chickens and skipping stones. Gil, you're mastering the fine art of not dying next to molten metal. Your games include thrilling titles like Guess How Hot This Is with your hand, Swing the Hammer Until Your Arms Fall Off, and the classic Try Not to Cry When You Ruin Another Nail. Your father, the blacksmith, is basically a human mountain. His vocabulary is 80% grunts, 20% hit it harder, and 0% sympathy. His hands feel like tree bark. His scowl is permanent thanks to decades of smoke and tax collectors, and his teaching style is simple. Watch, shut up, obey. It's too many questions, and you will either get a flying horseshoe launched in your direction or a full week of the silent treatment. Holidays, nice idea. Doesn't exist. The forge never sleeps, which means neither do you. Someone always needs a plow reforged, a nail straightened, or a blade sharpened, so free time is just a mythical space between one back-breaking job and the next. You're not just learning a trade, you're building pain tolerance, heat resistance, and a rare ability to fall asleep standing up. By 10 years old, you already smell like iron, swear like a miner, and carry buckets heavier than your missing family dog, who probably ran away years ago to escape the non-stop clanging. This is your life now. Welcome to the family business. Hope you like smoke, sweat, and 70 years of back pain. And just when you think maybe, just maybe, you'll get a childhood. Nope. Childhood here isn't real lit, just a medieval suggestion. The second you can lift something without toppling over, you're on the clock. Forget games or toys. Your playroom is a smoke-stained shed filled with open flames and sharp metal. Your jungle gym, a rack of tongs conveniently stored next to a glowing pit of coal. It's one wrong step, and congratulations, you've just become the main course at tonight's barbecue. Your official title is apprentice, but that medieval code would do all the miserable chores and still get yelled at. Stoke the fire, pump the bellows, sweep the ash, clean the tools, restack the coal, dodge whatever horseshoe is falling from the rafter sand. That's all before breakfast. Your paycheck, some bread, maybe a bowl of stew, and if you're really lucky, a grunt of mild approval that translates roughly to, not a total disaster today. Meanwhile, the village kids you once knew are out in the fields, maybe throwing sticks or learning how to milk goats. You envy them, even if they do smell like cheese and manure. They might grow up to be farmers or shepherds. Humble jobs, sure, but ones that involve fewer glowing weapons and surprise burns. You, on the other hand, are learning to make nails by hand. Nails, thousands of them, bent, twisted, and reheated again and again until they're straight enough to hold some lord's chicken coop together. If you're lucky, your father lets you swing a hammer on your own right after he points out every single thing you're doing wrong. And don't even think about saying, "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't exist in the forge. Fatigue is weakness. Burnout is for candles. You keep swinging, keep sweating, keep smiling, or at least keep from crying where anyone can see. Because in the eyes of your master, who is also your dad, you're not a child anymore. You're a blacksmith in training. And the training never ends. The forge isn't just where you work. It's your entire existence. It dominates your senses, reshapes your muscles, and rewires your brain. By the time you're in your teens, it doesn't just feel like a place. It feels like a living creature, a hot, smoky, temperamental beast that you must feed, control, and fear. You know the sounds by heart, the bellows wheezing, the iron hissing in the water, the sharp clang of hammer on metal echoing like a war drum. There's a rhythm to it all, like some grim medieval symphony, and whether you're wide awake or half asleep on your feet, your body falls into step with it. The heat stops feeling noticeable after a while, not because it's easier, but because your brain has just filed it under permanent facts of life, like gravity or taxes. You learn instinctively which stones will scorch you if you sit, which coals vanish fastest, and which patches of floor are secretly plotting against your toes. Your skin darkens, not from sunshine, but from smoke. Your wardrobe is simple, the same soot-caked tunic and stiff leather apron, reeking of scorched wool, grease, and sheer exhaustion. You don't really own much, but you do have this forge. Not legally, your father still runs it, but practically, it owns you. Silence becomes something you almost forget exists. The hiss, the clang, the crackle, they're constant. And when the forge does fall quiet, it's not peaceful, it's unsettling. You twitch like you've been missed a beat in a song that has been drilled into your bones since childhood. Friends, assuming you had any to begin with, barely catch sight of you. He's probably at the forge becomes your unofficial description. You're not just working here, fusing with it. You're not a blacksmith. You are the forge, fire and iron wrapped in two legs. And, in a strange way, a part of you begins to love it. Not the burns, not the blisters, but that fleeting moment when the shape finally emerges the way it's supposed to. When a horseshoe sits just right, when a blade flashes clean, when the metal bends to your will. For that instant, you're not a soot-smeared kid, you're a creator, a cog in the great medieval machine. Then reality crashes back with the next order. The fire roars again, and you're back to the grind. By the time your friends are stretching into their teenage growth spurts, your body already feels like it survived the siege. They're getting taller and stronger. You're getting hunched, scarred, and stiff. Your arms are thick, but not in a heroic knightly way, more in the teenager repeatedly assaulted by anvil's way. Your back is wrecked from endless hauling and hours bent over hot iron. Your knees creak when you crouch. Your shoulders pop every time you swing the hammer, which is every few seconds. That popping sound becomes part of your personal soundtrack, and your handslets talk about your hands. Once you had fingers, now you have cracked iron-tipped claws. It's burned, blistered, and stained with soot, so deep even the Nile couldn't wash it out. Cuts are constant, burns are daily, and half your nails are either blackened or gone. When someone passes you bread, you hold it like you're cradling a glass hedgehog, because every knuckle already feels cursed. Injuries don't get time to heal. Pull a muscle, keep going, twist your wrist, switch hands. The forge doesn't care that your elbow's on fire. Iron doesn't politely wait. And then there's sleep. You'd think, after a day of hammering and hauling, you'd collapse instantly. Manorial muscles ache too much to lie still. Your ears ring with echoes of clanging, and your arms twitch with phantom hammer swings, like you're sparring ghosts in your dreams. You hurt in places you didn't know could hurt. You smell like fatigue itself. Even your pain has pain. And what does your father say about all this? Just one word. Good. Because in his mind, you're learning. And in a twisted way, you are. You are not surviving in spite of the pain you are forged by it, hardened under the same fire, pressure, and repetition you impose unironed by adulthood. Your body feels like it's already lived 2 lifetimes and died halfway through both. And the worst part, this is only the beginning. In most jobs, smoke is an inconvenience. Here, it's basically your coworker, rude, suffocating one. The forge isn't just hot, it's a choking chamber. Every breath tastes like a mix of coldest, ash, and regret. If you can see more than 6 feet in front of you, it probably means someone forgot to light the fire. Ventilation, a joke. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets in more smoke than it lets out. Windows, not a chance. Just soot-blackened walls, your father's hacking cough, and the occasional gust of wind that blasts everything into your eyes. Your lungs don't breathe air anymore. They've entered a long-term toxic relationship with smoke. First, it burns, then it scratches, then it simply moves in and refuses to leave. Then one day, it just becomes normal. Coughing fits. It's part of the rhythm. Black mucus. Not ideal. But hey, at least it's consistent. You've reached the point where clean air feels suspicious. Even your voice changes. You start sounding like a 60-year-old goat farmer who drinks boiling tar. Words are scratchier, breaths are shorter, and your throat always feels like it's hosting a dust storm. But you keep working because you have to. And it's not just the smoke from the fire. It's metal dust from grinding, oil fumes from quenching, and sometimes burnt leather, charred wood, or whatever unfortunate material just dropped into the coals. You've probably inhaled 3 different types of poison before noon. Protective gear, please. A rag tied around your face is the best you can do. And even that gets sweaty, gross, and somehow smells worse than the smoke itself. You take it off, and suddenly it's a little harder to breathe. But at least you're not gagging on your own sweat. Long-term damage, of course. Asthma, black lung, early death, all part of the career package. But you're not thinking long-term. You're thinking about finishing that gate hinge before. Your father notices how crooked it is. In the world of a medieval blacksmith, air is just another burden. You don't breathe to survive. You breathe to keep hammering, okay? By now, you've developed an intimate relationship with your tools, mostly based on pain, necessity, and mutual disrespect. Your hammer, it's basically an extension of your arm. You've named it. You've cursed it. You've swung it so many times that your shoulder now clicks when you raise it like a haunted maraca. But without it, you're just a sweaty guy standing in a smoke-filled hut. The hammer makes you a blacksmith and also makes you bleed regularly. Then there's your tongs, clumsy, hot, and always pinching you at the exact wrong moment. You've burned your fingertips more times than you've successfully picked up anything. The iron slips. The grip fails. You yell. Your dad tells you to grip it like you mean it. Consider throwing them into the fire just to teach them a lesson. Your chisel. It used to be sharp, okay? Now it's mostly a suggestion of a blade because you've used it to shape, split, scrape, and occasionally pry open stuck doors when your neighbor's lock breaks. Files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets. Your tool bench looks like a medieval torture rack. And honestly, it kind of is. You've been jabbed, crushed, pinched, sliced, and impaled by every item you own. Your fingers have memory now. They flinch at the mere sight of a new tool. Your apron is meant to protect you, and it sorta does. By protect, you mean catch hot metal shards and hold them close to your body like a smoldering hug. It's more scorched than stitched, okay? And the leather stiffens like a corpse every winter. And yet, despite all this, you care for these tools like they're family. You sharpen them, oil them, line them up each night, because if one breaks, you're done. You can't work, you can't earn, you can't eat. No tool, no income. So, yes, your tools are your life. But don't be fooled. They've also declared war on your fingers, spine, and sanity. Every day they whisper, we help you survive, but we'll also slowly destroy you. And you say, yeah, that sounds about right. Now, pass the hammer. You don't wear a crown, carry a sword, or lead armies. But without you, the village stops functioning by Tuesday. You're the blacksmith, and everyone needs you all the time for everything. You're the medieval equivalent of customer service, tech support, and roadside assistance rolled into one suit-covered figure who smells like smoke and shame. The knight needs a new sword. You make it. The farmer breaks a plow. You fix it. A monk's bell cracks. A baker's oven door jams. A shepherd's gate latch won't close. Guess who gets called? That's right, you. Every single time. And they all act like you've just been waiting for their problems. They show up unannounced, mid-swing, covered in mud and entitlement. I know you're busy, they say, but could you just, tip the phrase that haunts you. But here's the best part. You never get thanked. They assume it's your duty, that you were born to serve. If their hoe works, their door closes, or their shield holds, they nod and walk away like you were the lucky one, as if you should be honored to repair their rusty bucket at sunset for half a loaf of stale bread. Payment often inconsistent. Sometimes in coin, sometimes in goods, sometimes in promises they forget by next market day. One man paid you with a dead chicken good for soup, Alita. It wasn't. You're also the go-to fixer for problems that don't belong to you. Bent hinges from someone sitting on a gate. You fix it. Broken dagger from a drunk fight. You fix it. Mysterious piece of iron no one can identify, but absolutely must be fixed. Yup, still you. Yet, when the village praises anyone, it's the knight, the priest, or the miller with the extra fat goat. Your background noise, a necessity. A reliable tool, not a person. But here's the secret. You know, they couldn't last a week without your work. Their fields would stall, their homes would fall apart, their horses would limp, and, while they may not sing songs about you, their entire world is quietly held together by your hands. You'd think peace would be good news. No raiders, no bandits, no screaming noblemen demanding a new sword by sundown. But for you, peace is terrible for business. Because you, the blacksmith, may work on plows and hinges, but what really pays the bills is war. When there's fighting, everyone needs you. Weapons, armor, arrowheads by the hundreds. Even horseshoes wear down faster under the weight of panicked cavalry charges. You're flooded with work. The forge burns brighter. The coins roll in. You may be exhausted, but your belly is full, and your debt to the alehouse momentarily forgotten. But then the war ends. The local lord declares a truce. The knights stop marching, and suddenly your orders vanish. No more swords, no more helmets, just a farmer asking if you can sharpen a sickle and maybe accept 3 onions as payment. Sure, you can make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, cooking spits, but there's not much profit in it. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard, but they want to pay you like a stable boy. You've become a negotiator, a beggar, and a merchant all at once, haggling for decent wages like your forge is a stall at market. Don't even think about raising your prices. People look at you like you just cursed their cow, but you're just hammering metal, they say, as if molten iron bends itself into shape while singing church hymns. You start to miss the chaos. Not the blood, not the burning villages, but the steady flow of orders, the purpose, the rush. When knights lined up outside your forge with dented shields and coin purses ready, you mattered. Now you're making keys for locked doors no one locks, patching pots that should have been thrown out, and fixing tools so old they belong in a museum, not a field. Peace for everyone else means safety and rest. For you, it means economic anxiety and hunger. And deep down, though you'd never say it out loud, part of you whispers, wouldn't mind a small skirmish. Just a little one. Maybe a minor border dispute. Because when swords break, you eat. Some jobs have an end, a clear finish line, a task completed, followed by rest, applause, or at least a warm bowl of stew. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. Your work is never done. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your dreams. You fix one thing and 3 more break. Patch a gate hinge. The wheel falls off the cart. Finish a batch of nails. Someone shows up demanding 10 more, but longer this time. And also, I can't pay you until harvest. You rise before the sun and go to sleep long after it disappears behind the trees. And even then, your brain keeps hammering. You dream of bellows, sparks, and that one customer who still owes you a half-dozen eggs and a thank you. Even the quick jobs never are. A villager walks in holding a mangled rake. It just needs a little fixing, they say. But you know, that's 2 hours of reshaping, reheating, hammering, and nodding politely as they ask, "Is it ready yet?" Every 5 minutes. And just when you think you can finally sit, maybe drink something that isn't lukewarm and smoky, your apprentice comes running. The friar's ill. You need to shoe the horse. Of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. And around here, blacksmith means everyone else's last resort. Forge demands attention constantly. The fire won't stoke itself. The tools rust if ignored. Your anvil shifts in the summer heat. Your bellows crack in the winter cold. Everything is either falling apart or threatening to. Even holidays don't stop the work. Sunday is technically a day of rest. Less, of course, someone's ox cart breaks on the way to market. Then, suddenly, you're in. Your apron, half awake, praying the priest doesn't walk by while you're hammering on the Lord's day. You don't keep a to-do list. So that implies there's a point when it'll all be crossed off. There isn't, because blacksmithing isn't a job. It's a cycle. Work, fix, repeat until your body gives out, or your hammer does. And the worst part, you kind of love it. You'd think that pounding hot iron all day would earn you at least 2 things: a good meal and a solid night's sleep. Wrong. In the life of a medieval blacksmith, food and rest aren't guaranteed. They're luxuries, like clean water or polite customers. Let's talk food first. You work from sun up to sundown, burning calories like a runaway horse. And what do you get? Piece of coarse bread, a bowl of cold pottage that might contain yesterday's turnip, and maybe a bit of salted pork if it's a special day, which it isn't. You eat standing up, one hand still clutching tongs, the other shielding your food from the forge's ash. Meals are rushed, conversations are grunts, and if someone knocks on the door mid-bite because their latch is stuck, guess what? That stew's going cold. You don't eat to enjoy. You eat to survive. Fuel in, hammer out. Now, let's talk sleep, or the cruel parody of it. When you finally crawl into bed, your hands are throbbing. Your back feels like it lost a bar fight, and your ears are still ringing from a full day of iron symphonies. Your bed, a straw-stuffed sack that's either too lumpy, too flat, or full of mysterious crawling things. Your blanket, a scorched wool sheet that smells faintly of forged smoke, old ale, and regret. And just as your eyes are closing, your brain remembers that order you forgot to finish, or that hinge that cracked weird, or the payment you still haven't received for that wagon wheel 3 weeks ago. Sleep becomes a negotiation. You lie awake, tossing, turning, calculating how long you can delay repairs without someone banging on your door at teens. Hey, one, banging on your door at dawn. And don't forget the midnight surprises. Someone's horse throws a shoe. A storm rips a door off its hinges. Or a noble's sword urgently needs sharpening before a hunt. Because, obviously, you don't need rest. You learn to survive on scraps and snatches, stolen bites, half-naps, and sheer stubbornness. Because, in your world, productivity comes before nourishment, deadlines before dozing. Food and sleep aren't breaks from the job. They're intermissions between hammer swings. You'll eat when you can, sleep when you're allowed, and hope the fire doesn't go out while you're dreaming. Layered like tree rings. Need to figure out what season it is? Just check the blister count. More than 5? It's summer. You've lost fingernails more than once. Some came off clean, others didn't. You once crushed your thumb so badly it turned black for 2 weeks. You didn't stop working, just switched hands and grunted more than usual. Cuts are constant. Sometimes it's a chipped edge. Sometimes a file bites you. Sometimes the iron fights back. Every week, something leaks blood. You wrap it in a scrap of cloth, curse under your breath, and keep working. Worse still are the burns. Some are mild, little, reminders that iron doesn't forgive. Others are worse, the kind that sizzle, bubble, and leave scars that tell their own stories. You've branded yourself more times than a cattle farmer. And at this point, you're not even mad about it. You're just used to it. Your grip strength is the only thing that's improved. You can crush walnuts like they owe you money, but dexterity, that's gone. You drop things. Your fingers shake when cold. You're 30 and have the hands of a 70-year-old knight who lost 3 wars and now plays tavern dice for soup. But despite it all, these hands are what keep you alive. They shape swords, fix hinges, and hold the hammer that holds your reputation. They hurt constantly, but they work. Because in this life, it doesn't matter how broken your body is, as long as you can still swing. Let's be honest, you don't smell great. Actually, you haven't smelled clean since you were 5. The moment you became your father's apprentice, your personal fragrance took a permanent turn toward unwashed ashtray mixed with burnt bacon and desperation. Welcome to Blacksmith life, where, no matter how hard you scrub, you smell like fire forever. The forge burns all day, and so do you. The smoke seeps into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Your sweat doesn't even smell like regular sweat anymore. It's more like smoked meat left out during a warm spring. You could bathe in theory, but baths are rare. Water is cold, and you're working 6 days a week, covered in soot, grease, and coal dust before the sun's even fully up. So, what's the point? You'd be filthy again by breakfast. Your clothes are no help. You wear the same singed tunic and scorched leather apron every day. They haven't been truly clean since the last festival, and even then, someone spilled ale on them before. Understand, heat wasn't made of stone, just exhaustion and responsibility. You teach the boy everything, okay? How to gauge heat by color, how to tap, not slam, how to listen to the metal, okay? You shout sometimes, more out of habit than anger. Hold it right. Okay. That's too cold. Don't cry. It's only a burn. You try to soften things when you can. A story by the fire, a piece of dried fruit when you can afford it. But tenderness doesn't last long in the forge. There's too much work to do. His hands will soon look like yours. His back will ache before his voice cracks. He'll learn to sleep through ringing ears and wake up before sunrise without being told. He'll outgrow his shirt, but not the burn marks, hey? And when you finally fall apart, knees, shoulders, lungs, he'll carry the hammer you can no longer lift. People might say it's unfair that the cycle should end, but this is how it's always been. A lineage of soot, steel, and survival. You're not just passing down a trade, you're passing down a legacy, a forge that never cools. So yes, you raise your son to do it all again. Not because you're cruel, but because someone has to keep the fire going. You've spent a lifetime standing, too close to fire, swinging too much iron, and breathing too little clean air. It was never a question of if your body would fail, just when. And now it's happening. Your knees creak like wooden doors in a storm. Your back refuses to straighten. Your fingers, once strong enough to bend steel, now tremble when you lift a cup. The forge still roars, but your arms won't answer. The hammer feels heavier every day, as if it knows it's nearly time to leave your grip. You don't go out in a blaze of glory. There's no heroic finale, no ballad. You simply slow down. You start handing tasks to your son. You sit more, watch more. He asks you questions, and for the first time, you struggle to remember the answers. The villagers start going to him now. Hey, they still nod respectfully when they pass you, but they talk to your boy. He's the one with the calloused hands now. The burns are fresh on him. The ache of the craft has shifted to new shoulders, and quietly, you are proud. You were never wealthy. You never owned land, or books, or fine clothes, but you were necessary. You kept swords sharp, wheels turning, gates swinging, and farms working. The world didn't thank you often, but it moved. Because of you, he likely won't see 50. Most blacksmiths don't. The damage piles up, lungs blackened from years of smoke, joints ground down like iron on stone, heart worn out from constant heat and effort. But when you're gone, your work stays. Nails in church doors, blades and noble hips, horses shaw and ready to ride. You leave behind no titles, just tools, scars, and a son with a hammer. And that, in your world, is enough. They may bury you in a simple grave. No gold, no statue, just a name carved in wood and a forge that still burns in your memory. But every clang that echoes through the village long after you're gone, that's the sound of you still working. You were never a knight. You didn't ride into battle with banners flying or wear polished armor that caught the sunlight, but you made that armor. You didn't farm the land, but you made the plows that carved it. You didn't bake the bread, but you forged the oven doors. You didn't build the castle, but every nail in its beams, every hinge on its gates, they were touched by your fire. You were a blacksmith, and in the medieval world, that meant everything. While nobles argued and kings changed crowns, you stood by your forge day in, day out, shaping the world piece by piece. 1,000 small things, rivets, hooks, braces, buckles, nothing that draws a crowd, everything that holds the world together. Your life was loud, but your legacy is quiet. No one wrote songs about your hammer. No bard praised your tongs. But every working wheel, every unbroken sword, every barn door that swings instead of falling, that was you. People walked past your forge and saw smoke. They smelled sweat and soot and assumed that was all. But inside was a symphony of heat and steel, of creation and endurance. You didn't just forge iron. You forged civilization. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And now, long after your hands have gone still, the fire continues. Your son lifts your hammer. Your grandson learns the heat. Your name might fade from memory, but the tools you built carry on, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. You were never crowned, never honored, never celebrated. But without you, nothing moved. No carts rolled, no armies marched, no homes were secured. You were the foundation beneath the history books. It's the ember glowing beneath the stories of kings. And that matters more than anyone ever said aloud. Because in a world made of wood, stone, and willpower, you were the fire, the silent spark that turned raw or into progress. You weren't just part of the world. You kept it turning, long before alchemy was associated with secretive European laboratories and robed mystics whispering over bubbling flasks. It was something far more sacred and far more ancient. Its true origin lies not in medieval Europe, but in the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt, where transformation wasn't a trick of science, but a divine principle etched into every corner of life and death. The ancient Egyptians had a word for it. Kemia, derived from Kim, meaning black land, referred to the dark, fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile. But this wasn't just a poetic nickname for their geography. It held deep spiritual meaning. To the Egyptians, black was the color of potential, of richness, of raw matter waiting to be transformed. So the land of Egypt itself became a metaphor for the transformative power of nature. This is where the word alchemy, alchemia, would eventually be born. If alchemy in Egypt wasn't just about turning base metals into gold, that obsession came later. For the ancient Egyptians, alchemy was everywhere. It was in the ritual of mummification, where the body of the dead was carefully preserved, transfigured, and prepared for eternity. It was in the temples where priests blended oils, herbs, and minerals into sacred elixir. It was in the stars, in the soil, in the very act of cooking bread and brewing beer. Transformation, they believed, was the language of the gods. In fact, Egyptian alchemy was never purely physical. It was spiritual at its core. To change something outwardly, you first had to understand it inwardly. This idea would echo through the centuries in alchemical texts from all cultures. Some legends say that these early Egyptian alchemists were guided by a divine figure. These headed god of wisdom, magic, and the moon. According to law, TH revealed the secrets of creation, transformation, and the soul's journey beyond death. These secrets, it was said, were written on a mystical object known as the Emerald Tablet. But before we get to that, we have to recognize one truth. Alchemy began not as a quest for gold, but as a sacred science of life. In Egypt, it was the fire that gave rise to all others. And everything that came after, from Persia to Paris, would trace its roots back to this ancient, fertile land. If ancient Egypt was the birthplace of alchemy, then TH was its divine midwife. In Egyptian mythology, TH wasn't just a god. He was the god of knowledge, magic, writing, time, and the very laws of the universe. With the head of an ibis and a moon disk above him, Thoth stood for equilibrium. And, in a world obsessed with order and transformation, he was a sacred scribe of all hidden truths. According to myth, Theami, he embodied it. The Egyptians believed he had authored thousands of books filled with divine wisdom. Most of these were never meant for mortal eyes. But one fragment of his knowledge would change history: the mysterious Emerald Tablet. Whispers of the Emerald Tablet have echoed through time like a riddle carved into the bones of civilization. Said to be inscribed in green crystal or emerald stone, the tablet was a short, poetic text, barely a dozen lines long. Yet, those lines were believed to hold the ultimate key to transforming matter, spirit, and reality itself. It begins with a sentence that has haunted thinkers for centuries. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This simple line, the principle of correspondence, suggests that the microcosm and the macrocosm are mirrors. What happens in the heavens happens within the human soul. What changes in the lab echoes in the cosmos. The Emerald Tablet didn't hand out instructions for making gold. It handed out a worldview. It said, the world is not fixed. Everything can be refined, elevated, transmuted. Not just lead into gold, but ignorance into wisdom, chaos into harmony, the mortal into the divine. The tablet also speaks of the one thing, the source of all creation, and how it rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying the power of all things in its wake. Many saw this one thing as the Philosopher's Stone, others as the soul, the ether, or even consciousness itself. But perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't the content of the tablet, but who could understand it. You had to be more than a scholar. You had to be a seeker. It was this sacred riddle, gifted by Thoth, that would survive the fall of Egypt and pass like a torch across borders and ages, first to Persia, then to the world. Egypt's golden age faded. Alchemy did not vanish. It migrated, traveling along trade routes carried by scribes, mystics, and conquerors. It passed into the hands of another ancient empire, Persia. But this was not merely a transfer of knowledge. In Persia, alchemy underwent a transformation of its own. one that blended spiritual fire with philosophical depth. The backbone of Persian alchemical thought was deeply shaped by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. At its heart was the concept of duality. It's a constant battle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, purity and corruption. Fire, the purest of all elements in Zoroastrian belief, wasn't just a symbol. It was sacred. It burned in temples representing divine wisdom. And that fire would light the crucibles of early Persian alchemists. But while spiritual ideas burned bright, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first real voice, one that still echoes today. Living in Roman Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimus was no ordinary philosopher. His writings fused technical descriptions of furnaces, stills, and elixir with strange, visionary journeys. In his most famous dream, he sees himself dismembered, burned, and transformed in an alchemical furnace. But rather than horror, this vision is divine. It's the symbolic death of the self, the purification of the soul. Zosimus didn't think alchemy was just about changing metals. He believed the alchemist must themselves be transformed. Just as base matter must be broken down before becoming gold, the alchemist had to suffer, purify, and transcend. In his words, alchemy was a mystery of spirit and matter alike. He introduced the idea of spiritual alchemy, a concept far ahead of his time. Zosimus's writings are full of strange symbols: lions devouring serpents, men melting into colored vapors, divine beings emerging from fire. These weren't chemical notes, they were metaphors for the soul's journey toward perfection. Zosimus was also one of the first to stress that true knowledge couldn't be bought or memorized. It had to be earned. The path of the alchemist was a path of discipline, suffering, and revelation. His influence would ripple across centuries and continents. And though many of his texts were lost or misunderstood, one thing was clear. Alchemy was no longer just a practice ants. It had become a sacred philosophy. The embers of ancient knowledge flickered across the remnants of Egypt, Greece, and Persia. A new empire rose, and with it, a golden age of wisdom. Under the banner of Islam, from the 8th to the 13th century, a vast intellectual renaissance began. While Europe descended into the Dark Ages, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became sanctuaries for philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and alchemy. At the heart of this revival stood a man whose name would become legend, Ibn, known in the West as GBA. More than a chemist, more than a philosopher, Jabir was a fusion of both. Often called the father of chemistry, his contributions to alchemy were so profound that they laid the foundation for modern science itself. Working in the courts of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th century, Jabir approached alchemy not as mysticism, but as a structured, testable discipline. He introduced laboratory methods still recognizable today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation. He invented new instruments, refined acids, and wrote over 100 texts, blending philosophy with chemical experimentation. But he didn't abandon the spiritual roots of the craft. Far from it. Jabir believed that everything in the universe was composed of combinations of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and infused with spiritual qualities. His system added a complex blend of numerology, astrology, and symbolism. In his view, every transformation in the material world mirrored a deeper transformation in the soul. Jabir also introduced the idea of balance, or mnesin, as the key to alchemy. Just as the body must be balanced to remain healthy, so must metals be balanced to attain perfection. Gold was not simply a metal, it was matter in perfect equilibrium. And if balance could be achieved through careful processes, then even the basest metal could be elevated. His influence didn't stay within Islamic borders. Over time, Jabir's texts were translated into Latin and circulated throughout medieval Europe, igniting a wave of Western alchemists who would build upon his teachings. Often, without even realizing, they were standing on the shoulders of a Persian genius. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy took its most decisive step forward. It was no longer just sacred symbolism. It was a method, a system, a science. And yet, it remained what it had always been, a map to transformation, both material and divine. As the Islamic world preserved and expanded the knowledge of the ancients, Europe remained cloaked in superstition and spiritual rigidity. But knowledge has a way of traveling, especially when it's too powerful to be contained. Slowly, piece by piece, alchemy made its way westward, smuggled through language, ink, and conquest. The bridge between East and West was built in places like Alexandria, once home to the Great Library, and later Toledo and Cordoba in Islamic Spain, or Al-Andalus. Here, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked side by side in rare moments of intellectual harmony. Translators toiled over Arabic manuscripts, decoding the works of Jabir, Susimos, and Aristotle, breathing forgotten ideas back into Europe. By the 12th century, Europe was starving for knowledge. The rediscovery of these ancient texts, especially on alchemy, was nothing short of a cultural detonation. But what arrived wasn't the practical science of chemistry alone. It was alchemy in its fullest form, a fusion of spirit, matter, and meaning. Monasteries began hiding strange manuscripts behind sacred scripture. Monks experimented with metals, not just to purify them, but to purify themselves. In hidden chambers and candlelit studies, European minds began to obsess over one idea: transmutation. The notion that base metals could become gold, and that the human soul could do the same. One of the most influential texts to reach Europe was the Turba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious dialogue among ancient sages discussing the secrets of nature. Then came the Picatrix, a massive Arabic grimoire filled with astrological and alchemical symbolism. These works didn't just pass on recipes, they carried worldviews. Those worldviews planted seeds in curious minds. The Latin translations of these texts circulated quietly, often disguised as religious or philosophical treatises to avoid accusations of heresy. After all, alchemy posed a threat. It challenged the fixed order of things. If lead could become gold, could a peasant become noble? Could man become divine? The church watched with suspicion, but alchemy's allure was too strong. It offered a hidden path to perfection outside of dogma, outside of authority. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had taken the torch. The flame that once burned in Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad now flickered in castles, monasteries, and secret societies. Alchemy had crossed the threshold, and it was about to evolve again. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy in Europe had transformed into something almost mythic. It was no longer just an intellectual pursuit. It was a holy quest, and at the heart of that quest lay one object, one idea, one obsession: the Philosopher's Stone. The stone wasn't just a chemical substance. It was a mystery wrapped in allegory, hidden in symbols, and cloaked in riddles. Said to have the power to transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality through the elusive elixir of life. Philosopher's Stone became the most sought-after artifact in Western esoteric tradition. But to those who truly understood alchemy, the stone was not physical. It was spiritual. In alchemical manuscripts, it went by many names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some claimed it was a literal, red, crystalline substance. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual awakening. But all agreed it was the key to ultimate transformation. Alchemists believed the universe itself was a living organism, constantly striving toward perfection. Metals, too, were alive, growing slowly in the womb of the earth. Lead was simply immature gold. And just as nature evolved toward balance, man could evolve as well. The philosopher's stone was the accelerant of that evolution. European alchemists like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later Paracelsus devoted their lives to understanding the processes of nature in pursuit of this ultimate truth. They built furnaces, studied astrology, collected rare minerals, and wrote cryptic texts filled with serpents, suns, dragons, and kings, all metaphors for the stages of inner and outer transformation. The stone's creation was said to follow a path called the magnum opus, or great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening, symbolic of death, decay, and the breaking down of ego. Then came albedo, the whitening, purification. Then citronus, the yellowing, illumination, and finally rubedo, the rening, rebirth, and the emergence of the stone. But why hide this process in metaphor? Because true transformation, alchemists believed, wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The stone would reveal itself only to those who were ready, not just intellectually, but spiritually. To seek the stone was to seek perfection. And while many searched for gold, the wisest alchemists knew the only thing worth perfecting was the soul. As alchemy took deeper root in medieval Europe, it began to slip into the shadows. What was once open dialogue in temples and scholarly exchanges in courts now became hidden practice. The reasons were many: religious scrutiny, political fear, and the simple fact that alchemy's language had become a secret code, decipherable only to the initiated. The church, wielding enormous power, saw in alchemy both promise and danger. While some Christian mystics embraced it, seeing the transmutation of metals as a mirror of Christ's resurrection, others condemned it. The idea that man could manipulate nature, even achieve spiritual ascension outside of divine grace, was heretical. To avoid persecution, alchemists cloaked their teachings in allegory and symbolism. Thus began an era where alchemy went underground, hiding in secret societies, coded manuscripts, and obscure symbols that only insiders could interpret. The Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claimed to hold ancient alchemical wisdom passed down from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos spoke of spiritual enlightenment, divine harmony, and the hidden sciences. Though no one could prove their existence, their ideas spread like wildfire, inspiring generations of seekers. Then there were the Freemasons, whose roots traced back to stone builders. A Poe, whose rituals echoed deeply with alchemical philosophy, purification, transformation, inner light. Whether or not they practiced alchemy in the literal sense, their symbolic language aligned perfectly with its aims, the building of the perfect self. Alchemy also found refuge in books of secrets, texts like the Mutus Liber, which contained no words, only a series of strange symbolic images meant to communicate the great work without uttering a single sentence. The manuscripts were written in green language, a form of wordplay, puns, and poetic double meanings that concealed their deeper truth. The alchemist's life had become one of duality. Outwardly, a scholar, physician, or monk. Quiet, obedient. Inwardly, a revolutionary, chasing the divine through fire and metal, spirit and stone. The very secrecy that threatened alchemy also still breathed, not as a science, but as a symbol of transformation, of unity, of the eternal dance between matter and spirit. While the world turned to chemistry for answers, some still look to alchemy for meaning, because some fires never go out. They just burn beneath the surface. Alchemy may have vanished from the halls of science, but it never truly died. Instead, it transformed just as it always taught that all things must. What began in the tombs of Egypt, refined in the fire temples of Persia, and encoded in the hidden texts of medieval Europe, didn't simply surface and live their lives entirely underground. And the deeper you go into these cities, the stranger the story becomes. To understand why people built cities beneath Cappadocia, we first need to understand the land itself, because Cappadocia is no ordinary terrain. Millions of years ago, a series of violent volcanic eruptions buried central Turkey under layers of ash. That ash hardened into a soft, porous rock known as tuff, a material light enough to carve with basic tools, yet strong enough to hold its shape over centuries. Rain and wind shaped it into strange formations. Fairy chimneys, simple caves, small hideaways to store food, to escape heat, or to shelter from storms. But over time, as threats grew and communities expanded, those caves grew too. They evolved into interconnected rooms, then levels, then networks. And once the digging started, it didn't stop. Entire societies vanished beneath the soil, carving deeper and deeper, not randomly, but with intention. Tunnels connected homes to kitchens, stables to wells, rooms to chapels. They created ventilation shafts that reached the surface and filtered fresh air through multiple stories. They even dug vertical staircases wide enough, the surface allowing quicker access to the outside when danger passed. Deeper levels housed kitchens, workshops, food storage, and livestock pens strategically placed to reduce the risk of contamination or fire spreading through the city. One of the most ingenious features was the ventilation system. Long vertical shafts were carved through the rock to allow air to circulate through as many as 18 underground levels. Some shafts were over 50 meters deep, yet so well placed that fresh air could reach even the lowest chambers without fans, without electricity, just gravity and brilliant design. Water was another. But dreams in Greece were not only for healing, they were political and prophetic, too. In Homer's epics, dreams come directly from Zeus. In the Iliad, the god sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to influence battle strategy. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates of dreams, one of horn, from which true dreams emerge, and one of ivory, from which come lies. Dream interpretation became a respected craft. Philosophers like Aristotle and Heraclitus pondered the nature of dreams, wondering whether they came from divine origins or simply the stirrings of the soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a 2nd century dream interpreter, wrote the Honorae Critica, a 5-book manual on how to decode dreams based on profession, gender, status, and symbolism. His work was referenced for centuries. The Greeks believed that during sleep, the soul loosened its grip on the body, floating in a liminal state where it could glimpse deeper truths. Whether sent by gods or born from inner reflection, dreams were never meaningless. To the Greeks, to dream was not just to see visions. It was to momentarily touch the divine mind. In the ancient world, dreams weren't just reflections of the mind. They were often believed to be prophecies. Many civilizations saw the dream state as a space where time unraveled, allowing the future to bleed into the present. To dream was sometimes to witness fate before it arrived. And that knowledge carried both great power and deep responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with rulers, generals, and prophets who acted based on their dreams. One wrong interpretation could cost a kingdom. One correct reading could change the course of history. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial omens, falling stars, dark suns, or blood-red rivers were seen as signs of coming war or disaster. Priests kept detailed records of these dreams, looking for patterns that might predict the fate of empires. These records weren't just stored, they were consulted during times of crisis. The Egyptians also viewed dreams as divine warnings. Pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed his reign was foretold in a dream, one in which the Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared the desert sand from its body. Whether fact or political storytelling, that dream secured its legitimacy in the eyes of the people. In the Greek world, prophetic dreams played out on the battlefield and in political chambers. For major decisions, leaders sought omens, either through dream incubation or by consulting oracles like those at Delhi. who often dreamt as part of their rituals. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before conquering Persia, taking it as a sign of divine favor. But prophecy wasn't only for kings. Everyday people also believed dreams could foretell marriage, childbirth, illness, or death. Artemidorus Honora Critica included thousands of such interpretations. Dreaming of losing teeth, of death in the family, dreaming of flight, a sudden change in fortune. The belief in prophetic dreams gave ordinary people a sense of access to the divine, a glimpse into the hidden threads of fate. But it also created anxiety. What if you missed a warning? What if you misunderstood? In a world where gods whispered in dreams, sleeping wasn't just a private act. It was a conversation with destiny. In the ancient world, healing didn't always come from herbs or blades. It often came from dreams. Sacred healing sanctuaries known as dream temples existed across many ancient cultures. Here, the sick didn't just seek medicine, they sought divine intervention. And the treatment began not with potions, but with sleep. The most famous of these were the Asclepians in ancient Greece, dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. But this wasn't a Greek invention alone. Earlier civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia also believed that dreams could reveal cures or offer spiritual purification. These temples weren't places to escape illness. They were places to encounter the source of healing, often through a divine dream. The process was called incubation. A pilgrim would purify their body through fasting, bathing, or ritual. Sacrifice before lying down in a sacred chamber, usually at night. The goal was simple, but profound: to dream with intent, to open the self to divine contact. In these dreams, gods or spirits would appear, offering advice, cures, or even performing dream surgeries. Some dreamed of snakes coiling around their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius. Others saw themselves bathed in light or touched by divine hands. When they awoke, temple priests, trained dream interpreters, would listen, translate, and prescribe actions based on the dream. Sometimes it meant drinking a special brew, walking a certain path, or offering thanks with a sacrifice. In some cases, the dream itself was considered the healing. These temples weren't isolated or fringe. Thousands of people visited them. Inscriptions etched into temple walls speak of miraculous recoveries, blindness cured, fevers broken, pain lifted. Whether the healings were physical, psychosomatic, or spiritual, the power of belief in the dream was undeniable. Dream healing crossed cultures. In Egypt, people visited temples of Serapis or Imhotep, seeking similar nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, temples to Gula, the goddess of medicine, offered spaces for dream divination and ritual sleep. What united all these practices was a shared belief. The body and soul were connected, and the soul spoke most clearly in dreams. Healing wasn't just about the flesh, it was about harmony between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of silence, dreams weren't just seen as stories. They were medicine. In the ancient world, the realm of dreams was not only a place of prophecy or healing, it was also a space where the dead could speak. Many ancient civilizations believed that dreams provided a rare and sacred moment, when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. To dream of a departed loved one was not seen as a simple expression of grief or memory. It was often believed that the spirit of the deceased had truly returned, bearing messages, warnings, or unresolved requests. These dream encounters were powerful, emotional, and deeply significant. In Egypt, where the afterlife was central to belief, dreams were thought to offer a direct link to the underworld. The soul, or kar, was believed to travel freely during sleep, even visiting the dead. A deceased family member appeared in a dream. It could mean they were displeased, in need of offerings, or simply reaching out with guidance. Egyptians sometimes wrote letters to the dead, left in tombs or shrines, asking for protection or help, hoping the request would be answered in a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the dead were treated with reverence and caution. The dead were believed to retain power in the afterlife, and a dream visitation could be a sign that something was amiss, perhaps a neglected burial ritual or an unfulfilled vow. These dreams were often followed by ritual purification or offerings to set things right. The Greeks also took dreams of the dead seriously. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld and speaks with the spirits of the fallen, a vision that mirrors what many believed could happen during sleep. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The waking have one world into a world of his own." That private world was where the dead could slip through, even beyond. Many cultures held similar views, that the dead were not entirely gone, and that dreams were their language. When the voice of a lost parent or child spoke in the night, it wasn't poetic, it was real. To the ancients, sleep was not a place to forget. It was where the past could still reach out and sometimes ask to be remembered. To ancient civilizations, dreams weren't just messages. They were puzzles rich with symbols, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs. Dreams were believed to carry coded language from the divine. Interpreting them wasn't easy. It required training, intuition, and often ritual. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, professional dream interpreters operated almost like priests or shamans. They studied vast collections of dream records, memorized symbol meanings, and knew how to distinguish between a true dream and a meaningless one. Their interpretations could influence public policy, medicine, and even warfare. Across cultures, certain dream symbols appeared again and again, and they were rarely literal. A snake might mean danger in one dream, transformation in another. Seeing fire could be a warning of destruction or purification. Flying might symbolize the soul breaking free of earthly burdens or a longing to escape something in waking life. In Egypt, dream books outlined hundreds of these symbols. Dreaming of drowning might signal an emotional storm to come. Seeing oneself blind could foretell a spiritual awakening or a painful truth hidden in plain sight. These were not guesses. They were part of a vast ancient language of symbols refined over generations. In Greece, Artemidoros of Daldis compiled the Anaretica, a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He emphasized that dream interpretation wasn't universal. Context mattered. A farmer dreaming of a flood meant something very different than a sailor dreaming the same. The Vona Critica is one of the earliest known texts to suggest that personal experience shapes dream, meaning a remarkably modern idea for the 2nd century. Dream interpretation was also tied to divination. Dreams were seen as one thread in a web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might consult oracles, draw lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify what they had seen. Some even kept dream journals inscribed on papyrus or clay, not just for personal insight, but to share with their community. For ancient people, symbols weren't just subconscious images. They were keys, part of a divine language whispered in sleep. And understanding that language meant unlocking the will of the gods, the forces of fate, and the secrets of the soul. To the ancients, a dream wasn't just a story. It was a message in code sent from the stars. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting fragments, strange images quickly forgotten after we wake, or at best material for therapists and artists. But to the ancients, dreams were far more than mental noise. They were sacred, structured, and respected. They offered guidance, healing, connection with the dead, and glimpses of the divine. Dreams were a part of the fabric of life, woven into medicine, religion, and governance. So, what happened? As science and rationalism rose, particularly in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were reclassified, no longer messages from the gods. They became neurological byproducts, electrical impulses, memory fragments, or emotional processing. The sacred became clinical. The symbolic was reduced to chemical. Even now, in the middle of our modern world where the glow of phone screens keeps us awake long past midnight, where schedules rule our days, and where noise follows us everywhere, dreams refuse to be silenced. They still find us. They still matter. In grief, in moments of deep change, or in those strange flashes of intuition, we return to them instinctively, searching for answers in their shadows. A dream of a loved one long gone can bring comfort that no counselor or priest can provide. For one night, the dead are alive again, and you share a meal, a laugh, or simply a look hand. You wake with a sense of peace you never thought possible. A recurring nightmare, on the other hand, can become a relentless mirror, dragging you back each night to confront what you ignore by day. The stress you bury, the fears you suppress, the truth you're unwilling to face in the light. Modern psychology tried to make sense of this. Freud argued that dreams were coded messages from the unconscious, a stage where repressed desires revealed themselves in symbols. Jung took it further, suggesting that dreams carried the voice of something collective, archetypes, mythic patterns that connected humanity across cultures and time. Whether you agree with them or not, both recognize what ancient peoples never doubted, that the world of dreams is not meaningless static. It is another layer of life, strange but significant. The ancients, of course, didn't separate waking and dreaming the way we do. To them, sleep was not a break from reality, but an extension of it. The dream world was a second stage of existence where the soul traveled freely. It was a mirror, yes, reflecting back fears, longings, and guilt, but also a window opening onto something greater. Sometimes it was a god whispering instructions, sometimes a warning of famine or war, sometimes the voice of an ancestor returning to guide the living. What dreams offered, above all, was something society could not: a dialogue with the unknown. In a world filled with hunger, storms, and disease, where the future was fragile and uncertain, the dream was a bridge to forces beyond human control. And perhaps that's the piece we've lost, not the symbols themselves, but the humility to listen. Today, we treat dreams as curiosities, as fleeting nonsense to laugh about over breakfast, or, at best, as psychological puzzles. But in doing so, maybe we silence a voice that has always been with us, across time and civilization. One belief held firm: dreams are not accidents. They are thresholds, doors to a place where human logic does not rule. And the question has never really been whether dreams are real. The ancients didn't ask that, because, to them, reality was larger than daylight. The question was whether we are brave enough to step through the doorway they open, to risk listening, to admit that some truths can't be spoken in daylight, but must be whispered in the silence of night. If you look across the ruins of temples, through old scrolls, clay tablets, fragments of myths, you'll find the same echo, from the Sumerians carving dream records in cuneiform, to Egyptian priests interpreting visions for pharaohs, to Greek philosophers writing treatises on dream divination. The same warning repeats: pay attention. Close your eyes, not to escape the world, but to understand it. Because when the noise of the day finally fades, when your mind drifts beyond the reach of reason, something older has space to speak. Something beyond memory, beyond logic. And if we listen carefully, we let dreams carry us rather than brushing them off, we might rediscover what the ancients already knew: that dreams are not echoes of the brain firing in the dark. They are not accidents or illusions. They are the oldest language of humanity, the language of the soul itself. Also, when you dream tonight, don't dismiss it as random noise from a tired brain. Sit with it. Ask what it might be saying, even if the answer doesn't come easily, because dreams have always been more than passing shadows, okay? They are reminders that we are more than our daily routines, more than the roles we play while awake, okay? They are the hidden conversations between the conscious and the eternal, a doorway we walk through each night, whether we notice or not. And perhaps the question is not whether dreams matter, but whether we're willing to let them matter again. Because in the end, the ancients weren't wrong, okay? Dreams are not just echoes of the mind, okay? They are the oldest language of the soul still speaking, still waiting for us to listen. Real Romans suffer silently, then write poetry about it later. So yes, pain is always on the table, and it usually comes without warning, without remedy, and definitely without sympathy. On that cheerful note, let's take a look at what happens when you actually go see a Roman doctor. So, you've hurt yourself. Maybe it was the infected blister from yesterday's work. Or maybe you tried to shave with a bronze blade, and now your chin looks like a gladiator training ground. Either way, it's time to seek medical attention, which in ancient Rome is less about healing and more about surviving the attempt. Let's begin with the basics. Roman medicine is a chaotic mix of Greek theory, mystical guesswork, and a surprising amount of leaves. The core belief: the body is ruled by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling off. One of them is out of balance. The solution: drain something. So your doctor, who may or may not also be your barber, immediately reaches for the leeches or a knife, because bloodletting is the default treatment for everything from migraines to moral failings. Have a cough. Let's open a vein. Depressed. We'll just drain some sadness out of your arm. Surgery. Oh yes, it exists. Roman surgeons had scalpels, forceps, and even bone drills. What they didn't have were anesthetics. You stay conscious through the whole procedure, gripping the edge of a wooden table, while a man in a dirty toga digs into your flesh with the confidence of someone who once saw a scroll about it. Antiseptics, not really a thing. They might wash wounds with wine or vinegar, which does help, but also burns like divine punishment. Infection is a common side effect. So is death. Prescriptions vary wildly. You might be given honey, garlic, crushed beetles, or a pus made of herbs, ash, and vary. Specific types of animal dung. If things get worse, you're advised to sleep in a temple, pray to Asclepius, and hope divine dreams will deliver your cure. And if none of it works, well, your doctor shrugs, your family lights a candle, and your neighbors start whispering about what kind of omen your death might be. It's not that Romans didn't care about health. They just hadn't quite figured out what helped and what murdered you more efficiently. Next time you sneeze, be grateful for modern antibiotics, and that you don't live in a world where healing often starts with blood loss after a long day of sweating, bleeding, and dodging carts. You're starving. Time for dinner, or as the Romans called it, sinner. Just don't expect anything remotely comforting. Let's start with what's not on the table. No pizza, no pasta, no tomatoes, no potatoes, no chocolate, no sugar, and absolutely no coffee. None of those things have been discovered or imported yet. This isn't Italian cuisine. This is pre-eat edible survival. You sit down to a wooden bowl, something brown and vaguely hot. It's probably pulse, a porridge made of spelt beans or lentils. Okay. It tastes like wet gravel, with a hint of herb if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, it tastes like wet gravel without the herb. Protein is rare unless you caught it, trapped it, or fished it yourself. Meat is expensive, and even when you do get some, it's often off. Roman cooking didn't use refrigeration, so preservation meant heavy salting, smoking, or marinating it in garum, fermented fish sauce that smells like dead ocean and burns your soul just thinking about it. If you're feeling festive, There might be boiled vegetables, hard cheese, or the occasional fig. Rich Romans dined on exotic dishes like roasted flamingo. That doesn't numb you enough. There's always more wine. Now, let's take a walk through justice, Roman style. Spoiler, it's not comforting. You've survived work, dinner, and a gladiator getting impaled for applause. You might think you're safe now, that as long as you keep your head down, the law will protect you. That's adorable. In Rome, the law doesn't protect. It reminds you that you're small, replaceable, and that mercy is a luxury reserved for statues of emperors. First off, legal status matters. If you're a citizen, you have rights. In theory, you can't be flogged in public unless someone important gets really annoyed and you get a proper trial. If you're a non-citizen, justice comes in the form of a fist, a branding iron, or a swift execution outside the city gates. Slaves, they are property. If a slave murders their master, even if the master deserved it, every slave in the household might be executed just to send a message. That message, don't even think about it. If you're accused of a crime, don't expect a calm chat with a lawyer. Trials of public theater. The wealthier party brings witnesses, bribes, and dramatic gestures. You bring your tunic and a sinking feeling. If you cry on cue, that might help. If you have no patrons, pray to Jupiter and hope the magistrate isn't hung over. Punishments are designed not just to hurt, but to deter. Thieves can be branded or have their hands broken. Liars might get their tongue pierced, clawed, public flogging, or exile if you're lucky. And if you insult the emperor, it's not jail time, it's death, usually creative. Some crimes require public punishment, ideally in front of a crowd that cheers louder than they did for the morning's beheading. Crucifixion is popular, long, slow, humiliating. 8 isn't reserved just for Jesus. It's the go-to for rebels, robbers, and anyone the state wants to make an example of. And remember, law enforcement isn't there to help. The vigils are Rome's version of firefighters and police, underpaid, overworked, and often corrupt. If you're mugged, they might shrug. If you bribe them, they might help you mug someone else. So, yes, Rome has laws written in stone, recited in forums, but they serve power, not justice. Now, let's talk about gods, because you're not just obeying men here. You're on Jupiter's turf. After surviving the streets and dodging Roman justice, you may hope to find comfort in religion. A little peace, a little personal spirituality. Nope, not here. In the Roman Empire, religion isn't a private affair, it's an institution. An ever-present cloud of incense and obligation wrapped around every waking moment of your life. You don't choose your gods, they choose you. And there are so many. There's a god for everything. Door hinges, cardia, sewers, Placina, boundaries, terminus, and even mildew robus. You can't walk 5 paces without crossing a shrine. If you don't pause to bow, light a candle, or mutter a prayer, you're not just being rude, you're inviting catastrophe. Maybe not today, but eventually. And when your roof collapses, everyone will nod and say, "Ah yes, he skipped the Saturnalia offering." Religious festivals fill the calendar, dozens per year. On those days, business stops, animals are sacrificed, and the air smells like roasting bull and wet marble. You attend out of piety, but also fear, because if the gods aren't honored properly, they'll retaliate with plagues, droughts, or a really bad harvest that ruins everyone's lentil supply. Now, let's talk about emperor worship. The state wants you to revere the emperor, not just as a ruler, but as a living god. You're expected to offer incense at his altar, sing his praises, and never roll your eyes during a triumphal procession. That's treason adjacent. If you're caught not participating in public worship, say you're a little too quiet during the Vestalia, or you don't show up to toss grain into the temple flame, you could be labeled impious, atheistic, or, worst of all, suspicious. Suspicion in Rome is like blood in shark-infested waters. Can't If you're part of a foreign cult, you'd better keep that under wraps unless it's officially approved. The state doesn't like sandal strap placement could make or break you. Roman society is a ladder, but it's covered in oil and lined with daggers. At the top are the senators, old money, toggers with purple stripes, and land ownership so vast it has its own postal code. Below them, the equestrians, the wealthy business class. Then come the plebeians like you, the struggling middle and lower classes. Below that, freedmen, slaves, foreigners, and the guy who accidentally insulted a statue of Augustus once. Want to move up? You'll need patrons, okay? Powerful individuals will protect you in exchange for lifelong loyalty, errands, favors, and the occasional vote. It's like having a boss, godfather, and landlord rolled into one charmingly condescending package. Each morning, you visit your patron's home as part of the Salugio. You wait in line with other clients, praise his haircut, maybe compliment his son's toga, then beg for a favor, usually money, food, or a recommendation. If you're lucky, he tosses you a coin and lets you carry his litter through the forum. Congratulations, you're now connected. She didn't linger behind the safety of her ranks. She fought in the vanguard, mud under her nails and fire blazing beneath her helm. As the campaign dragged on, so did her hair. By the third month, it had knotted in two coarse ropes. Heavy with sweat, dust, and whispered prayers muttered before dawn charges. To her foes, the sight was dreadful. To her soldiers, divine. They named her the Witch Queen not for sorcery, but because no noble woman should still be in the field, armor dented, skin unwashed, refusing comfort. Surely, the rebels whispered, something unnatural kept her going. But there was nothing mystical about it, just raw, merciless resolve. By the time her banners flew outside the final rebel citadel, her name carried farther than the revolt itself. Its taverns buzzed with jests that the enemy feared not Parthian steel, but the thought that Rhodogon would never cleanse herself again, and perhaps there was truth in it. The last bastion loomed ahead, a fortress swollen with stolen grain, its gates braced, its walls bristling with archers. Inside, traitors swaggered with smug certainty, convinced they could outlast her siege. A fatal error, for, by now, her presence was myth. Even the enemy spoke of the woman who will not wash. Rumor painted her hair as iron, her eyes sleepless, her body beyond fatigue. Legends multiplied like ladders against a wall. But Rhodogon was no phantom. She was flesh, bone, and strategy. Instead of hurling her men against stone, she starved the city into ruin-cutting supply lines, seizing couriers, fouling wells. Time itself became her blade. While the rebels withered behind their walls, she camped among her troops, eating their bread, drinking their thin wine, patrolling by torchlight, and through it all, she still refused to comb. What began as stubbornness became oath. Her tangled mane turned symbol, proof to every soldier that their suffering had meaning. Inside the city, hope fractured. The defenders, who had expected to break enemy morale, found their own collapsing. Famine crept in. Commanders argued. Men deserted. Cracks spread like frost through stone. And then came the slip. A small gate, left unguarded whether by exhaustion or betrayal, was discovered by her scouts. That night, beneath cover of storm and shadow, Rhodogon's warriors slipped inside and flung the gates wide. By dawn, the stronghold had fallen. On the walls, sweat-streaked and ash-covered, Rhodogon stood encamped, unbowed and utterly terrifying. Her triumph was not trumpeted, it was washed. Months of grime, battle, and siege ended, not with parades, but with water. She summoned no courtly chamber, only a public square, and called her soldiers to bear witness. Basins were filled, oils prepared, combs laid out like sacred relics. And there, before the eyes of those who bled with her, Rhodogon cleansed her hair. Every knot undone was a city reclaimed. Every rinse of water carried rebellion into the dust. Some swore she wept, others that she laughed, but all agreed that the silence of hardened men watching was holy. No crown was needed. The filth itself had been her coronet, and the vow more precious than jewels. In that act, Pythia gained not just a princess, but an emblem. She might have marched straight to the capital, basking in scribal praise and noble adoration. Instead, she stayed among her troops, eating, listening, remembering. Then she chose the long road home, city by city, walking the streets she had freed, checking their defenses, stamping out the last sparks of rebellion. Radagon's legend was secure, not gilded by pomp, but etched in memory-tangled hair, steel discipline, and the woman who would not wash until victory was absolute. This wasn't mere ceremony, it was strategy. Radagon knew the danger of victory, how quickly it can melt into complacency. Empires don't fall from defeat alone. They fall from forgetting why they fought in the first place. She wanted the rebels and loyalists alike to understand that Pythian strength wasn't just cavalry and coin, it was embodied in her very presence. A woman who chose hardship over comfort and earned loyalty by example, not decree. In loyalty she received. Everywhere she went, people gathered not to gawk at royalty, but to stare in awe at her, not polished, not perfumed, but real. Can't. She didn't bring fear. She brought accountability. Can't. She asked for reports, heard complaints, paid for supplies out of her own war coffers. She rewarded cities that had stayed loyal and offered clemency carefully, cautiously to those who repented. By the time she reached the royal court, her return had already become a legend. Scribes rushed to record her tale. Artists argued over how to capture her, wild-haired and battle-worn, or radiant and reborn. Ministers whispered about the implications. A woman commanding armies, keeping oaths, and now standing at the heart of Pythian power, with the loyalty of half the provinces in her hand. And here was the dilemma. What do you do with a princess who is more popular than most kings? Some urged she be married off, as if that would contain her influence. Others wanted her placed in charge of border defenses permanently. But Radagon didn't seem concerned with titles or politics. She had proven what she needed to. The battlefield had been her throne. The dust, her crown, and her name, already etched in the hearts of soldiers and citizens alike, needed no royal inscription to endure. She didn't need a coronation. She had already been crowned, not with gold, but with history. In the months following her campaign, Radagon didn't seek the limelight, but it followed her anyway. She became a subject of poetry, sculpture, gossip, and awe. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Every soldier who'd fought under her command returned with a tale, and every tale made her larger, more enduring, more untouchable. Yet, in the palace halls of Pythia, where politics slithered like snakes behind silk curtains, her silence was unnerving. She didn't boast, she didn't lobby, she didn't ask for titles or lands. Instead, she observed, listened, and understood the real battlefield had only shifted from stone walls to whispered conversations. Even the king, her father, or possibly her brother, depending on the exact moment in the tangled Pythian dynastic timeline, had to tread carefully. Radagon wasn't just popular, she was respected in a way few men at court could compete with. Not adored for beauty or bloodline, but for leadership, for command. She had turned her vow into policy, her filth into folklore. And yet, the silence she kept was as deliberate as any military maneuver. She didn't tell others what she planned next, because perhaps even she didn't know. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting. She wasn't commanding troops or outwitting rebels. She was still, in that stillness, unnerved many. What does a woman who conquered without a crown do next? One theory among historians is that Roden used this silence as leverage. Her presence alone, her every quiet nod or glance, forced decisions. Officials hesitated to propose bad policy for fear she'd frown. Generals delayed campaigns, hoping she might weigh in. Her silence wasn't passive. It was a tool. She had discovered that not speaking could be more powerful than speaking. And so she remained a living legend, walking the palace corridors, her freshly washed hair braided not just in gold thread, but in memory. Her very existence challenged the norms. She had proven that path beyond might wasn't confined to masculine hands, could ride into battle with the tangled hair and return with cities at its feet. Tet. And all she had to do now was wait, because sometimes the greatest move is no move at all. As the years passed, Roden's name slowly faded from the formal records. Pathian scribes more eager to elevate kings and dynasties than unruly warrior princesses began to downplay her campaign. The silence she once used as a weapon now became the excuse for eraser. No grand mausoleum was raised in her name. No epic poem commissioned by the state bore her face on golden scrolls. But that's the thing about true legend. It doesn't need permission to survive. In the outposts where her army had marched, in the villages she spared, her name remained a whispered spell. Mothers told stories of her to their daughters, not as a fairy tale, but as a warning to any man who underestimated a woman with a mission. Soldiers recited her tactics as if they were sacred text and rebels. Well, even decades later, they still spoke of her as if she might ride again from the dust with hair flying like war banners. There's something profoundly unsettling about someone who breaks every rule of their time and still wins. Radagon wasn't content to be decoration in a court. She didn't play the flute, paint birds, or practice the refined art of being quietly ignored. She burned through her time like a comet and then vanished just as quickly. Historians have debated what became of her. Some believe she retired from public life, choosing peace over politics. Others think she remained an advisor in the shadows, shaping Pathian strategy from behind the veil of anonymity. A few romantics claim she rode out one final time to settle a border dispute and disappeared into legend. Never confirmed, never denied. But what's certain is this: her legacy endured where it mattered most, in the people. She may not have worn the crown, but she ruled in ways no diadem ever could. She redefined what loyalty meant. She showed that a vow, even one as strange as refusing to comb your hair, could be as binding as a royal decree and far more inspiring. And though history books may offer her only a footnote, the dust of Pathias still remembers her, because you don't need a marble statue to be eternal. You just need to keep your vow and win. Centuries after her death, Radagon's story remains a paradox, well known in whispers, yet elusive in ink. No towering statue bears her likeness. No royal tomb sings her praises in carved stone. But in the collective memory of those who admire rebellion, endurance, and principled ferocity, she is immortal. Not in the way kings are remembered, but in the way forces of nature are. She didn't need to conquer foreign lands or sign monumental treaties. What she conquered was expectation, in a world where women were told to wait behind curtains while men spilled blood in their name. Roden tore the curtain down and marched out barefoot, helmet in hand. She didn't ask for command. She took it, and the empire didn't collapse. Tia followed. More importantly, she taught her people a lesson that no decree could enforce, that loyalty doesn't come from fear. It comes from seeing your leader suffer beside you, from watching them choose discipline over comfort, from watching them keep a vow longer than anyone thought possible. She wasn't perfect. No legend is, but her story endures, precisely because it wasn't polished or clean. It was tangled, muddy, honest, like her hair on that final day of victory. In that filth was dignity. In that vow was a vision of leadership stronger than any title. When her soldiers looked at her, they didn't see a princess. They saw someone who believed in the fight more than her own vanity. And that's the part history couldn't quite erase. Even now, long after Pathia has crumbled and its cities turned to sand, Her name returns in moments of resistance. Artists revive her. Writers search for her footprints, a vow not to wash until victory. It sounds absurd to some, but to those who've had to claw their way through injustice, it makes perfect sense. Radagon was never about glamour. She was about grit, okay? And in the end, it was the dust that crowned her, not gold. Dust, the same substance emperors tried to escape in death, yet the very thing she wore like a badge of honor. She was forgotten by kings, ignored by chroniclers, but remembered by the dust. And that's where legends truly live. Not in stone, but in soil, before empires clashed in blood-soaked sand, before kings trembled at her name. Tomius was simply a daughter of the wind, born to the raw, open steppe. The land she came from was not gilded in marble or echoing with philosophy. It was brutal, free, and endlessly vast. This was the world of the massage. Fierce nomadic horse archers who rode like spirits of the plains, their lives shaped by survival, honor, and war. We know little of Tomius's childhood, but we can imagine the rhythm of it. She would have learned to ride before she could run, to shoot before she could speak in full sentences. Among the massage, girls were not caged in tents or veiled by silence, okay? They trained beside the boys, rolled with the warriors, and grew up with iron in their blood. To lead, one had to bleed, and two, even as a young woman, bled for her people. Her tribe worshipped the sun and sky, lived off their herds, and buried their dead with weapons, ready for battle in the afterlife. They had no cities, no golden temples, but they had pride. And when enemies approached, they met them not with prayers, but with arrows. Tamius likely came to power after the death of her husband, who may have ruled the tribe before her. But what's certain is that when the moment came, she didn't inherit leadership. She seized it in a time when most women were considered property. Tamius commanded an army. She negotiated with kings. She dared to speak as an equal, and if they didn't listen, she made them. She was more than a queen. She was Shahad, the steppes checkmate, a warrior chief in bronze and leather, who would soon face the greatest empire on earth. But power, especially for a woman, never comes without consequence. As Tamius began to solidify her rule, whispers grew louder. Across the mountains to the south, a king was watching. His name was Cyrus the Great, and he wanted more. The stage was set. The steppe wind howled, and Tomius, daughter of warriors, would soon ride into legend. While Tomius reigned over the open steppes far to the south, a different kind of power was rising. Structured, imperial, relentless. Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, had already conquered Lydia in the west and Babylon in the south. His banners flew over deserts, mountains, and cities where languages changed every few days. But Cyrus wasn't done. He was a builder of empires, and every builder eventually eyes the horizon. To Cyrus, the massage were a threat wrapped in opportunity. They weren't rich in gold or cities, but they controlled the northeastern frontier, and that meant access to key lands, resources, and trade routes. More importantly, the Masasi had something no empire could afford to ignore. Pride, and pride, in Cyrus's eyes, could be bent or broken. But Cyrus also knew that brute force wasn't always the best first move. He had a reputation for cleverness, diplomacy, and strategic trickery, so he tried a different approach, one that kings before him had used to dissolve threats without a single drop of blood. He proposed a marriage, according to ancient sources, notably Herodotus. Cyrus sent envoys to Damiris offering an alliance through matrimony. On paper, it was a royal match. The great king of Persia and the warrior queen of the Masog. But Tamius wasn't naive. She saw the proposal for what it was. Not an offer of love or partnership, but a calculated attempt to absorb her people without a fight. She declined, and that rejection didn't sit well in the halls of Pepololis. With the diplomatic games over, Cyrus shifted to his favorite language, war. He ordered his army to cross the Araxes River, the natural barrier that separated Persia from the land of the Medes. He was going to take what Ptolemais refused to give. But Ptolemais was already preparing. She knew the terrain. She knew how her people fought on horseback, fast and furious. And, most of all, she knew Cyrus wasn't just coming for land. He was coming to crush a woman who dared to say no. The world's most powerful king had declared war, but he had no idea what kind of fury he had just awakened on the steppe. Cyrus the Great, master strategist and seasoned conqueror, believed he could outwit us. He had faced kings, crushed cities, and subdued nations. To him, the Magi were little more than wild nomads with fast horses, and no cities to defend. He didn't realize he was stepping into the path of someone just as cunning and far more furious. Ptolemais had warned him. After rejecting his marriage offer, she sent a clear message: cross the Araxes River and you will regret it. But Cyrus crossed anyway, building a bridge of boats to carry his army into Magi land. Instead of striking immediately, Ptolemais pulled her forces back, luring Cyrus deeper into unfamiliar terrain. Corpse. In every age, she became what people needed: a mother, a avenger, a wild queen, a lesson in hubris, or a symbol of feminine power. But one truth cuts through the myth. She changed history. Ptolemais didn't inherit a throne. She forged it in fire and fury. And for one brief, unforgettable moment, the steppe queen proved that not all empires rise. Some fall to the hooves of warriors who ride with vengeance in their hearts. Much of what we know about Ptolemais comes not from local massage records. They left no stone tablets or royal archives, but from the pen of a Greek Herodotus, often called the father of that hunted with hawks, that slept under the stars. A freedom that could not be neatly drawn on a map. Today, her statues rise from Kazakhstan's capital cities, and her face adorns coins and textbooks to modern Central Asians. She is a mother of nations, a link to a pre-Islamic, pre-Soviet, proudly nomadic past. A reminder that their identity wasn't born in submission, but in the cry of battle and the gallop of horses. In a world still divided by power, by gender, by memory, Ptolemais is a beacon, not just because she killed a great king, but because she taught us something even greater. Ateides, not given, it is seized. That sometimes leadership looks like a mother grieving her son and refusing to let the killer walk away. We often wonder why some names survive while others vanish. Ptolemais survived because she was unforgettable. Because in a time when women were expected to disappear into the tents of men, she rose, blade in hand, fury in heart, and carved her story into the flesh of history. Empires fall, statues crumble, but legends ride. And somewhere in the whispering winds of the steppe, a queen still gallops, unbroken, undefeated, and utterly unforgettable. In ancient Egypt, beekeeping wasn't a hobby, was a state-sponsored science with divine approval. Long before modern apiaries, Egyptians had already developed an organized mobile system for managing bees and extracting honey. By 2400 BCE, beekeeping was depicted in detail on the walls of tombs in the sun-drenched necropolises of Saqqara. It wasn't just about harvesting honey. It was a sacred practice embedded in agriculture, medicine, religion, and even the afterlife. The Egyptians used horizontal clay tube hives, typically stacked in rows and laid on their sides. These were nothing like modern wooden boxes. They looked. Mentions of bees and honey go back to the Sumerians. In Akkadian and Babylonian records, we even find words for apiaries bee enclosures, often placed within temple grounds or royal estates. That detail matters. Honey wasn't for everyone. It was controlled, managed, and counted. Both honey and wax moved easily between roles, sacred offering, medicine, food, and valuable trade good. A lost hive was more than a nuisance. It was an economic wound. The sharpest clue to how vital bees were comes from the Code of Hammurabi around 1750 BCE. Buried among laws about theft, farming, and contracts are a few lines about swarming and stolen honey. K. If your bees invaded a neighbor's field and caused damage, you were liable. If honey was stolen, repayment had to be made, sometimes in silver, sometimes in jars of honey itself. In a world where wealth was measured mostly in grain, the fact that honey earned its own legal protection says everything. To Mesopotamians, bees weren't just insects. They were charged with meaning. Some texts describe them as envoys of the divine, tied to Ninurta, the god of farming and war. It was an emblem of order itself, a mirror of law, and proof that even nature could be drawn into the human project of civilization. Far to the northwest, in the highlands of Anatolia, the Hittites saw bees differently. Long before Greece dominated the stage, these people made the hive a sacred ally. In their eyes, bees carried purity, okay? They weren't just producers of honey, but mediators between humans and gods. Where Egypt and Mesopotamia leaned on economics and efficiency, the Hittites wrapped bees in ritual meaning. Texts from the 14th and 13th centuries BCE reveal bees summoned in purification rites. In one ceremony, a bee is invoked to carry away impurity, anger, and evil. The insect is then set free, not crushed. For an age that offered animals by the thousands, such restraint shows reverence. Honey, in turn, was woven into offerings and libations, anointing rites and feasts. It wasn't merely eaten, it was poured, burned, sanctified. Honey was a bridge between mortal intent and divine favor. Material traces suggest the Hittites used clay or straw hives, perhaps tube-shaped like those of their Levantan neighbors, kept in temple enclosures. Beekeeping likely fell under priestly control, folded into state and seasonal rituals. And while honey was sweet, it was also politically used in healing, sacrifice, and diplomacy alike. The bee itself became a symbol that outgrew its size. Hittite texts even note migration patterns, linking swarms to flowering cycles, evidence of careful observation. For them, the drone of the hive wasn't background noise. It was the pulse of the cosmos. When Greece rose, bees became both subject and symbol. The Greeks didn't simply keep them, they modeled thought upon them. The hive was a metaphor for the polis, the ideal city-state. Ordered, communal, disciplined, Greek innovation advanced apiculture. Unlike earlier fixed hives, Greek terracotta models had removable sections, making harvests less destructive. With smoke piped through clay bellows, they load the hive before extracting comb, a discovery that allowed multiple yields without collapse. Tuttle himself studied bees obsessively. In History of Animals, he cataloged hive behavior, recognizing specialized roles among workers and defenders. Hay misnamed the queen as a king, but his work framed centuries of inquiry. Meanwhile, saturated Greek life, it sweetened wine, preserved fruit, enriched cakes, and treated wounds. Philosophers believed ambrosia the sustenance of God's wise, honey mixed with wine. Bees, too, carried mythic charge. They were linked to Artemis, to Demeter, two priestesses called Melisi bees in human form. The insect embodied the feminine divine, tireless, fertile, ordered. To study bees, the Greeks thought, was to glimpse the rhythm of nature itself, perhaps even the intentions of Olympus. Rome, as always, scaled what others revered. Where the Greeks watched in wonder, the Romans organized. Beekeeping became an imperial industry, stretching from Gaul to Hispania. Drawing on Etruscan and Greek precedent, Roman writers like Varro and Columella codified techniques into agricultural manuals, describing hive types, seasonal care, swarm management, even pest control. Roman hives varied: hollow logs, bark cylinders, clay tubes, baskets sealed with mud. Adaptation was key across climates. Smoke was made with herbs thyme, oregano both, to pacify bees and perhaps flavor honey. Harvesting used knives and strainers. Was melted and filtered for candles, writing tablets, seals, and waterproofing. Honey permeated Roman life. It was mixed into wine to make balsam, baked into breads, drizzled on meat, and carried by athletes as an energy source. Physicians prescribed it for coughs, fevers, and wounds. Villas often housed large-scale apiaries run by enslaved labor, tracked in ledges, their products flowing into markets and exports. To the Roman mind, bees were citizens in miniature, obedient, productive, vital to order. A hive was a household, scaled and idealized. Across all these civilizations, the bee hovered at the edge of the divine. In Egypt, they were born from Ra's tears. In Mesopotamia, they served as messengers of gods. In Anatolia, they cleansed evil. In Greece, they became priestesses. In Rome, they mirrored the empire itself. Was never just sweetness. Was law, ritual, medicine, offering, symbol. The hum of the hive carried more than sound, it carried meaning, binding nature to culture, the mortal to the eternal. Honey found its way into the sacred heart of ritual. In Egyptian temples, it was poured out to honor gods and placed with the dead to guide them safely into eternity. The bee itself rose as a royal emblem. Pharaohs of Lower Egypt bore the title He of the Sedge and the Bee, fusing political authority with the order and balance symbolized by the hive. Across the Mediterranean, Greek culture layered bees with feminine divinity. Priestesses of Demeter and Artemis, guardians of fertility in wilderness, were called Melisi, literally bees. These women were seen as living bridges between mortal and divine. Some traditions even held that Delphi, long before Apollo, was tended by priestesses. And the Pythias, the famed Delphic oracle, was sometimes hailed as the Delphic bee. Its philosophers, the hive itself, was a model of cosmic perfection. Unified, tireless, harmonious, thinkers and mystics alike compared its society to the ideal polis-disciplined, cooperative, and reverent. Stoic philosophers admired bees for their instinctive obedience to duty. Later, Christian writers adopted the same metaphor, praising bees as symbols of chastity and resurrection, creatures that created abundance without lust, and whose life cycle hinted at rebirth. Far older traditions added further layers. In Mesopotamian incantations, bees carried away ritual impurity. In Hittite purification rites, a living bee was set free after symbolically absorbing the sins of the community. Honey and wax were cast into sacred flames, worked into amulets, and written into spells meant for protection and healing. For ancient peoples, bees were not merely insects. They were liminal beings, creatures of hidden spaces, givers of golden food, defenders who stung only in need. Embodied miracle and mystery alike. Honey's divinity extended to medicine. Long before anyone named bacteria, healers knew instinctively that honey closed wounds, soothed coughs, and preserved flesh. To many, it seemed alchemy, yet its powers were chemical. Natural acidity, antimicrobial enzymes, and hydrogen peroxide. Egyptian physicians placed honey at the core of their remedies. The Ebers Papyrus c. 1550 BCE lists it in over 500 recipes. Honey mixed with figs, milk, garlic, or resins treated infections, stomach ailments, and burns. They knew that wounds covered with honey resisted rot and healed more swiftly. Greek physicians carried the practice forward. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, prescribed honey for ulcers, fatigue, and breathing troubles. He blended it with vinegar into oxymel to cut phlegm and lower fever. Greek athletes drank honey water to restore strength faster than wine or water alone. In India, Ayurveda praised madhu, classifying it by taste and potency. Texts warned against heating it, but endorsed it for indigestion, coughs, wounds, and even antidotes to poison. Honey was also sacred, offered to gods, consumed in fast, purifying body and soul alike. Okay. Rome followed suit. Okay. Pliny the Elder listed honey in dozens of treatments, from laxatives and gargles to battlefield salves. Mixed with poppy, it calmed pain. Applied directly, it reduced swelling. Surgeons carried honey into war as a frontline medicine. Beeswax, too, was indispensable, molded into plasters, fillings, and protective salves, prized for its resistance to decay. Two ancient healers. Honey was not luxury, was survival. Beekeeping itself demanded innovation. Far from simple harvesters, ancient apiarists were craftsmen, experimenters, and careful students of nature. Hive design was one of their greatest advances. Egyptians favored long clay cylinder terracotta tubes stacked in rows, mimicking the hollow crevices bees sought in nature. Greeks and Romans used woven skeps and clay hives, some with lids or removable sections. This meant honey could be taken without destroying the colonia. Breakthrough in sustainability. Smoke became another essential tool. The Greeks crafted clay smokers and bellows to channel fumes into hive entrances. Smoke masked the alarm scent of guard bees, keeping them calm. Romans refined this, burning herbs like thyme and oregano to both pacify bees and subtly flavor honey. Bronze or wooden knives sliced the combs. Presses and strainers separated liquid honey from wax, which was melted and purified for candles, bombs, and writing tablets. Protection was minimal. No suits, just experience and careful hands. But they lacked in gear. They made up in observation. Ancient keepers tracked swarms, flowering cycles, and seasons. Some even practiced early transhumance, moving hives to follow blooms, much like today's migratory beekeepers. Storage, too, was vital. Egyptians sealed honey in ceramic jars, ensuring it kept for years or even centuries, as tomb finds prove. Honey's eternal shelf life was legendary. Just as important were rituals of respect. In many places, ceremonies were performed to honor the spirit of the hive, ensuring harmony. Spiritual observance mattered as much as tools in sustaining colonies. Beekeeping in antiquity was more than agriculture. It was craft, science, and devotion interwoven. The hives along the Nile, in Anatolia, in Greek temples, and Roman estates all reflect a balance of reverence and pragmatism. Their techniques, sustainable harvesting, hive innovation, smoke, and seasonal migration laid foundations for modern apiculture. This shaped the pharmacopoeias of Egypt, Greece, Rome, and India. Their metaphors shaped religion, philosophy, and myth. Honey was not only foodite, was medicine, ritual, symbol, and survival. Bees themselves stood as models of order and bridges between worlds. The legacy of those keepers lingers. Migratory beekeeping remains central to agriculture. Honey's healing powers remain respected. The hive still inspires metaphors of unity and balance. And though technology has advanced, the relationship between humans and bees endures unchanged. Humanity depends on bees for sustenance, health, and ecosystem balance. Bees, in turn, shaped civilizations civilizically and scientifically. The hum of the hive, first heard in the Bronze Age, still echoes as proof that even the smallest of creatures can bind together worlds. But dreams in Greece were not only for healing, they were political and prophetic, too. In Homer's epics, dreams come directly from Zeus. In the Iliad, the god sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to influence battle strategy. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates of dreams. One of horn, from which true dreams emerge, and one of ivory, from which come lies. Dream interpretation became a respected craft. Philosophers like Aristotle and Heraclitus pondered the nature of dreams, wondering whether they came from divine origins or simply the stirrings of the soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a 2nd century dream interpreter, wrote the Honorae Critica, a 5-book manual on how to decode dreams based on profession, gender, status, and symbolism. His work was referenced for centuries. The Greeks believed that during sleep, the soul loosened its grip on the body, floating in a liminal state where it could glimpse deeper truths. Okay. Whether sent by gods or born from inner reflection, dreams were never meaningless. Okay. To the Greeks, to dream was not just to see visions. It was to momentarily touch the divine mind. Okay. In the ancient world, dreams weren't just reflections of the mind. They were often believed to be prophecies. Many civilizations saw the dream state as a space where time unraveled, allowing the future to bleed into the present. To dream was sometimes to witness fate before it arrived. And that knowledge carried both great power and deep responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with rulers, generals, and prophets who acted based on their dreams. One wrong interpretation could cost a kingdom. One correct reading could change the course of history. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial omens, falling stars, dark suns, or blood-red rivers were seen as signs of coming war or disaster. Priests kept detailed records of these dreams, looking for patterns that might predict the fate of empires. These records weren't just stored, okay? They were consulted during times of crisis. The Egyptians also viewed dreams as divine warnings. Pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed his reign was foretold in a dream, one in which the Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared the desert sand from its body. Whether fact or political storytelling, that dream secured its legitimacy in the eyes of the people. In the Greek world, prophetic dreams played out on the battlefield and in political chambers. For major decisions, leaders sought omens, either through dream incubation or by consulting oracles like those at Delhi, who often dreamt as part of their rituals. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before conquering Persia, taking it as a sign of divine favor. But prophecy wasn't only for kings. Everyday people also believed dreams could foretell marriage, childbirth, illness, or death. Artemidorus Honora Critica included thousands of such interpretations. Okay? Dreaming of losing teeth, a death in the family, dreaming of flight, a sudden change in fortune. Okay. The belief in prophetic dreams gave ordinary people a sense of access to the divine, a glimpse into the hidden threads of fate, but it also created anxiety. What if you missed a warning? What if you misunderstood? In a world where gods whispered in dreams, sleeping wasn't just a private act. It was a conversation with destiny. Okay? In the ancient world, healing didn't always come from herbs or blades. Okay? It often came from dreams. Sacred healing sanctuaries known as dream temples existed across many ancient cultures. Here, the sick didn't just seek medicine, they sought divine intervention. And the treatment began not with potions, but with sleep. The most famous of these were the Asclepians in ancient Greece, dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. But this wasn't a Greek invention alone. Earlier civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia also believed that dreams could reveal cures or offer spiritual purification. These temples weren't places to escape illness. They were places to encounter the source of healing, often through a divine dream. The process was called incubation. A pilgrim would purify their body through fasting, bathing, or ritual. Sacrifice before lying down in a sacred chamber, usually at night. The goal was simple, but profound: to dream with intent, to open the self to divine contact. In these dreams, gods or spirits would appear, offering advice, cures, or even performing dream surgeries. Some dreamed of snakes coiling around their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius. Others saw themselves bathed in light or touched by divine hands. When they awoke, temple priests, trained dream interpreters, would listen, translate, and prescribe actions based on the dream. Sometimes it meant drinking a special brew, walking a certain path, or offering thanks with a sacrifice. In some cases, the dream itself was considered the healing. These temples weren't isolated or fringe. Thousands of people visited them. Inscriptions etched into temple walls speak of miraculous recoveries, blindness cured, fevers broken, pain lifted. Whether the healings were physical, psychosomatic, or spiritual, the power of belief in the dream was undeniable. Dream healing crossed cultures. In Egypt, people visited temples of Serapis or Imhotep seeking similar nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, temples to Gula, the goddess of medicine, offered spaces for dream divination and ritual sleep. What united all these practices was a shared belief. The body and soul were connected, and the soul spoke most clearly in dreams. Healing wasn't just about the flesh, it was about harmony between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of silence, dreams weren't just seen as stories. They were medicine. In the ancient world, the realm of dreams was not only a place of prophecy or healing, it was also a space where the dead could speak. Many ancient civilizations believed that dreams provided a rare and sacred moment when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. To dream of a departed loved one was not seen as a simple expression of grief or memory. It was often believed that the spirit of the deceased had truly returned, bearing messages, warnings, or unresolved requests. These dream encounters were powerful, emotional, and deeply significant. In Egypt, where the afterlife was central to belief, dreams were thought to offer a direct link to the underworld. The soul, or kar, was believed to travel freely during sleep, even visiting the dead. A deceased family member appeared in a dream. It could mean they were displeased, in need of offerings, or simply reaching out with guidance. Egyptians sometimes wrote letters to the dead, left in tombs or shrines, asking for protection or help, hoping the request would be answered in a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the dead were treated with reverence and caution. The dead were believed to retain power in the afterlife, and a dream visitation could be a sign that something was amiss, perhaps a neglected burial ritual or an unfulfilled vow. These dreams were often followed by ritual purification or offerings to set things right. The Greeks also took dreams of the dead seriously. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld and speaks with the spirits of the fallen, a vision that mirrors what many believed could happen during sleep. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The waking have one world into a world of his own." That private world was where the dead could slip through, even beyond. Many cultures held similar views, that the dead were not entirely gone, and that dreams were their language. When the voice of a lost parent or child spoke in the night, it wasn't poetic, it was real. To the ancients, sleep was not a place to forget. It was where the past could still reach out and sometimes ask to be remembered. To ancient civilizations, dreams weren't just messages. They were puzzles rich with symbols, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs. Dreams were believed to carry coded language from the divine. Interpreting them wasn't easy. It required training, intuition, and often ritual. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, professional dream interpreters operated almost like priests or shamans. They studied vast collections of dream records, memorized symbol meanings, and knew how to distinguish between a true dream and a meaningless one. Their interpretations could influence public policy, medicine, and even warfare. Across cultures, certain dream symbols appeared again and again, and they were rarely literal. A snake might mean danger in one dream, transformation in another. Seeing fire could be a warning of destruction or purification. Flying might symbolize the soul breaking free of earthly burdens or a longing to escape something in waking life. In Egypt, dream books outlined hundreds of these symbols. Dreaming of drowning might signal an emotional storm to come. Seeing oneself blind could foretell a spiritual awakening or a painful truth hidden in plain sight. These were not guesses. They were part of a vast ancient language of symbols refined over generations. In Greece, Artemidoros of Daldis compiled the Unerotica, a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He emphasized that dream interpretation wasn't universal. Context mattered. A farmer dreaming of a flood meant something very different than a sailor dreaming the same. The One Critica is one of the earliest known texts to suggest that personal experience shapes dream, meaning a remarkably modern idea for the 2nd century. Dream interpretation was also tied to divination. Dreams were seen as one thread in a web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might consult oracles, draw lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify what they had seen. Some even kept dream journals inscribed on papyrus or clay, not just for personal insight, but to share with their community. For ancient people, symbols weren't just subconscious images. They were keys, part of a divine language whispered in sleep, and understanding that language meant unlocking the will of the gods, the forces of fate, and the secrets of the soul. To the ancients, a dream wasn't just a story. It was a message in code sent from the stars. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting fragments, strange images quickly forgotten after we wake, or at best material for therapists and artists. But to the ancients, dreams were far more than mental noise. They were sacred, structured, and respected. They offered guidance, healing, connection with the dead, and glimpses of the divine. Dreams were a part of the fabric of life, woven into medicine, religion, and governance. So, what happened? As science and rationalism rose, particularly in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were reclassified, no longer messages from the gods. They became neurological byproducts, electrical impulses, memory fragments, or emotional processing. The sacred became clinical. The symbolic was reduced to chemical. Even now, in the middle of our modern world where the glow of phone screens keeps us awake long past midnight, where schedules rule our days, and where noise follows us everywhere, dreams refuse to be silenced. They still find us. They still matter. In grief, in moments of deep change, or in those strange flashes of intuition, we return to them instinctively, searching for answers in their shadows. A dream of a loved one long gone can bring comfort that no counselor or priest can provide. For one night, the dead are alive again, and you share a meal, a laugh, or simply a look hand. You wake with a sense of peace you never thought possible. A recurring nightmare, on the other hand, can become a relentless mirror, dragging you back each night to confront what you ignore by day. The stress you bury, the fears you suppress, the truth you're unwilling to face in the light. Modern psychology tried to make sense of this. Freud argued that dreams were coded messages from the unconscious, a stage where repressed desires revealed themselves in symbols. Jung took it further, suggesting that dreams carried the voice of something collective, archetypes, mythic patterns that connected humanity across cultures and time. Whether you agree with them or not, both recognize what ancient peoples never doubted, that the world of dreams is not meaningless static. It is another layer of life, strange but significant. The ancients, of course, didn't separate waking and dreaming the way we do. To them, sleep was not a break from reality, but an extension of it. The dream world was a second stage of existence where the soul traveled freely. It was a mirror, yes, reflecting back fears, longings, and guilt, but also a window opening onto something greater. Sometimes it was a god whispering instructions, sometimes a warning of famine or war, sometimes the voice of an ancestor returning to guide the living. What dreams offered, above all, was something society could not: a dialogue with the unknown. In a world filled with hunger, storms, and disease, where the future was fragile and uncertain, The dream was a bridge to forces beyond human control. And perhaps that's the piece we've lost. Not the symbols themselves, but the humility to listen. Today, we treat dreams as curiosities, as fleeting nonsense to laugh about over breakfast, or, at best, as psychological puzzles. But in doing so, maybe we silence a voice that has always been with us, across time and civilization. One belief held firm: dreams are not accidents. They are thresholds, doors to a place where human logic does not rule. And the question has never really been whether dreams are real. The ancients didn't ask that, because, to them, reality was larger than daylight. The question was whether we are brave enough to step through the doorway they open, to risk listening, to admit that some truths can't be spoken in daylight, but must be whispered in the silence of night. If you look across the ruins of temples, through old scrolls, clay tablets, fragments of myths, you'll find the same echo, from the Sumerians carving dream records in cuneiform, to Egyptian priests interpreting visions for pharaohs, to Greek philosophers writing treatises on dream divination. The same warning repeats: pay attention. Close your eyes, not to escape the world, but to understand it. Because when the noise of the day finally fades, when your mind drifts beyond the reach of reason, something older has space to speak. Something beyond memory, beyond logic. And if we listen carefully, we let dreams carry us rather than brushing them off, we might rediscover what the ancients already knew: that dreams are not echoes of the brain firing in the dark. They are not accidents or illusions. They are the oldest language of humanity, the language of the soul itself. Also, when you dream tonight, don't dismiss it as random noise from a tired brain. Sit with it. Ask what it might be saying, even if the answer doesn't come easily, because dreams have always been more than passing shadows. They are reminders that we are more than our daily routines, more than the roles we play while awake. They are the hidden conversations between the conscious and the eternal. A doorway we walk through each night, whether we notice or not. And perhaps the question is not whether dreams matter, but whether we're willing to let them matter again. Because, in the end, the ancients weren't wrong. Dreams are not just echoes of the mind. They are the oldest language of the soul, still speaking, still waiting for us to listen.